Winter during World War II wasn't just cold, it was deadly. Frozen soil, icy winds, empty fields. Yet somehow, German farmers managed to grow food. One mistake could mean an empty cellar. One failed harvest could mean hunger. And in a time of war, there was no room for failure. So how do you feed a nation when the ground turns to stone? The answer doesn't start in winter. It starts months earlier, when the sun is high and the soil still gives. Under sunny skies, German farmland flourished. Fields of golden rye, vegetables like carrots and beets, and fruits like apples and cherries filled baskets. Cellars overflowed, and there was enough for families, animals, and even the winter ahead. But then, winter came. The warmth vanished. The same soil that welcomed seeds turned rock hard. Days grew gray and short. Sunlight faded, barely brushing the fields before disappearing. Farming, which in summer felt effortless, became a fight. A fight against frost and frozen ground. So, to survive the brutal winter months, German farmers relied on not one, but three key strategies. Firstly, they stored what they could before the frost. Then they planted crops before the freeze to ensure food would return in early spring. And lastly, they harvested what could grow during winter. These crops weren't grown in winter, they were grown for winter. They were summer's final gift, and they had to be gathered quickly before the first frost would ruin them. One mistake could mean an empty cellar. One delay could mean hunger. So they were pulled, packed away, and guarded like treasure. Potatoes were at the heart of it all, dug from the earth before the frost could bite and layered in straw-lined cellars where the cold couldn't touch them. They weren't just food, they were insurance. Mashed, boiled, fried, turned into dumplings or pancakes. Even the peels weren't wasted. They were fed to pigs, tossed into soups, or occasionally dried for hard times. Beets, carrots, and summer onions followed suit. Harvested in late summer, then stored in wooden boxes or barrels packed with damp sand. Onions were dried in the sun to harden their skins and seal the stems, making them resistant to rot. Once cured, they were hung in bunches. Fruits like apples, pears, and plums were picked at peak ripeness, then stored in cool cellars, or boiled down into jams and preserves. Bursts of summer sealed into jars. These crops didn't just fill pantries, they bought time. Time to wait until the winter fields could give again. Next up are the crops planted before winter, so they could rise when the thaw came. Rye led the charge. Sown in the final days of autumn, it sank its roots deep before the freeze. Then, under a blanket of snow, it slept. When spring returned, rye rose first. Fast, steady, reliable. It became the backbone of German bread. Dense, dark, nourishing, and long-lasting. Garlic and winter onions were tucked into the soil just before the freeze. Unlike their summer counterparts, these weren't meant to be stored. They were planted to overwinter underground, sprouting early in spring to bring fresh flavor to a table. When snow began to fall and the ground froze solid as stone, some crops stood their ground, asking for no shelter, only frost and fortitude. Frost-proof survivors. Kale and cabbage were warriors in green. Frost didn't kill them. It improved them. The cold softened their bite, bringing out their sweetness. In the darkest months, they stood tall, offering fresh nutrients when nothing else could. They weren't harvested at once, but could be picked as needed throughout the winter. Cabbage, especially, was a lifesaver. It stretched across meals and across days, shredded into slaw, braised until tender, or transformed into the sharp, life-extending sauerkraut. Leeks held firm beneath the snow. They didn't need to be harvested all at once, but could be picked as required, their delicate flavor elevating even the simplest wartime stew. Turnips, rutabagas, parsnips, and Jerusalem artichokes slept deep underground. The cold couldn't reach them, or if it did, they didn't mind that much. These roots became meals that stuck to the ribs, grated into golden fritters, mashed into soft piles, or stirred into thick, steaming soups. If not eaten immediately, they were stored in cold cellars and other cool, dark places to keep them fresh. And winter spinach, particularly frost-sensitive, but some varieties could survive mild frosts, especially when grown under cold frames. It was usually harvested only when needed, as the yield was small, a taste of green in a world of gray. To make survival safer and to help every crop thrive just a little more, farmers used clever techniques to give nature a boost. That's where crop rotation, mulching, and cold frames came in. Crop rotation was key. It meant planting different crops in the same soil across seasons to keep the soil healthy. Clover and alfalfa, for example, added nitrogen to the soil, acting like a natural fertilizer. When fertilizer was scarce, farmers planted crops like mustard in late autumn, not to harvest, but to later plow back into the soil, enriching it naturally. But preparing the soil was only half the battle. Protecting fragile plants through winter required clever workarounds. To shield crops from freezing nights, farmers built cold frames. Simple glass-top boxes that trapped sunlight by day and held warmth by night. Mulching came next. Layers of straw, leaves, or burlap kept the ground from freezing and held in moisture. Some even added manure underneath to create hotbeds, warm pockets in otherwise frozen fields. Every trick mattered. With war draining resources, farmers had to become inventors. Fuel went to the front. Steel fed the factories. Fertilizer was rationed. What remained was ingenuity. To grow even more crops, greenhouses were built, pitched together from whatever materials were at hand. Old window panes, scrap wood, twisted metal. These makeshift shelters let farmers start seedlings in the bitter cold. When tractors ran out of fuel, horses stepped in. And when even horses were gone, farmers strapped themselves into the harness. Human hands that once harvested now plowed. To feed the soil, they returned to nature. Compost piles sprang up behind every barn. Wood ash, barn manure, even crushed animal bones. Everything organic was turned back into the earth to nourish the next crop. With storage space running out, or never existing in the first place, farmers turned to the earth, digging deep root cellars and insulating them with straw and sand. Carrots, turnips, and potatoes were packed tightly into crates to hold off frost and rot. But who was doing all this backbreaking work? With so many men gone to war, women, they carried the burden. They became plow drivers, seed sowers, and repair workers. They worked from dawn to dusk in freezing winds, keeping the farms alive. Children joined them. Small hands planted seeds and collected vegetables. Even the elderly pitched in, doing what they could. Even prisoners of war and forced laborers were sent to farms to fill the gaps. They worked under harsh conditions, often with barely enough food themselves, to keep German agriculture moving. And while people struggled, animals played their own critical role in this battle against winter. Animals were lifelines. Cows and horses needed hay, silage, and stored turnips to survive the winter. Pigs ate potato peels and scraps. Nothing went to waste. Chickens still laid eggs. Small, but precious sources of protein when meat was scarce. Every animal had a purpose. Milk, eggs, manure for fertilizer, even warmth for nearby crops. Livestock made the whole farm ecosystem work. So, against all odds, frozen fields, and the chaos of war, German farmers waged a different kind of fight. Not with guns or tanks, but with seeds, soil, and sheer determination. They coaxed life out of frozen ground. They fed families, soldiers, and entire villages with nothing but ingenuity and hard work. The question left is, how exactly did they manage food storage through an entire freezing season? That's a story for another day. Until then, like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more food stories during the toughest times in history.